So for those that are new to this whole thing, or at least those that are new to Python, might be wondering, wait a second, Python kind of looks like every other language that I've seen. It's got classes, it's got methods, and well, you would be right at this point. I really haven't shown you what makes Python so special, and I don't blame you for thinking that. Well, let's take a look at the following very quickly. Okay, remember this class, we have attributes and we have methods, and we created objects here. Well, actually we only created one object. The beauty of classes is that we can create an infinite amount of object. And as I said before, so far this literally looks like any other language. So this is what differentiates Python from others. So let's get out of here, and here we are at the command line. I'm going to run the command clear to get to actually clear the screen. So Python has what they call an interactive environment. Most languages have this interactive environment. I realize this, but Python has an extra special interactive environment. And to run it, if you're on Windows and you don't have Python 2 already installed, you just type in the word Python and you get right into that environment. But in what I'm on now, Debian Linux, it comes with Python 3 or Python already installed, and it probably, well, for cybersecurity tools purposes, it probably has Python 2 installed as well, but Python 3 is distinct from Python 2, so to get into the proper interactive development called idle, simply type in Python 3 and boom, you are in the interactive environment. So you can run some basic experimental programs right off the bat. So for example, A equals apple. So A is apple, but more importantly, you can actually do useful things. For example, let's create a random generator. So all we have to do is say import random. This is where we can import other classes / packages into our environment. And so all we have to say is x equals random.rand range. And I know this is not very exciting for those out there, but I will just say x equals random.rand range 100, and we have this generator right here. And let's run this again, and x is 51, and we can actually minimize our effort right here, completely minimize our effort. And let me go back to the top right here and run idle again, and we can say import random, and then I'll just say print random.rand range, and then we could say 1,000. So that would print a number from basically 0 to 999, and we have 64, 35. So basically from 2 lines of code, we can actually do something kind of productive. And for example, you can run a lotto this way, because all that does is randomly generate a number from 1 to 10 or 1 to 50 based on, when the lady grabs the golf balls or something like that. And you should know that there are 2 distinct ways to run a Python program. So you have this wonderful environment. Now you can actually run Python in the normal way, quote unquote. So in other words, that's basically creating a program. So you can actually create a .py program. So sudo, and then we'll just run vim as our text editor, and we'll just say aug19 2024.py, and we can pretty much do the same thing. Import random, print random.rand range, and then we could just pick a number from 0 to 9 like this, and then we can actually run it outside of here. So let's and how do you run an actual Python program is you type in Python 3 and the name of the Python file. Make sure you include the .py extension, and we have 6. Let's run it again. 7, 4, and 8. So this allows us, these 2 run modes of Python programming allows us to program in 2 ways. If we utilize the idle, we can do things such as experimentation. So as I said, we can practice doing things like generating a random number. We can practice creating discrete structures and see how that affects the output. And once you're sure of the direction you want to go in idle, you can then exit out of idle. And I don't know why it's not doing it. There we go. And you can then create a program. You can create a .py file, and that is your traditional way of programming in Python. And what's more, before I end this little video, let's go to Python 3 again, the idle. And you know what? Let me exit out of here and let me get back to the top and let me go back into Python 3. I just wanted to show everyone this. If you import this, literally this, it will show you what they call the Zen of Python. And as it says, this is what Python, Python is less of a language and more of a mindset. So the Zen of Python, beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit. And so if we go back, and I encourage everyone to read this in detail. I want to keep these videos as short as possible. But if we go back to the first program right here that we created, I wanted to show you one of the pieces of Zen of Python is you take a look at this method right here. And a lot of other languages will use specific syntax or characters to delineate the end of a line. In Java, for example, and in what's the language I'm PHP, they utilize the semicolon. Most languages, C++, utilize the semicolon to end a line for multi-line structures. In this case, we have a function or method. A function outside a class is just called a function. A function inside a class is a method. So whether or not you're dealing with a method or a function, it's clear that the way Python deals with functions is different than, like, say, in Java. In Java, you have to end every line with a semicolon, and usually the name of the function or whatever is everything. You have italics, and Java utilizes the curly braces with extreme. So in other words, there would be a curly brace here, and to end the line and to end the entire idea, there would be a closing curly brace there. As you can see, Vim, this text editor, has already prepared for that because it highlights the curly braces. And in Python, you don't really need that. If you dared use a curly brace at all, even if it's opening and closing, it will probably give you some sort of an error. Python really promotes the idea of simplicity and beauty. So in other words, less is more. So the less characters you type, the better it is. The problem is with Python, the drawback is to delineate the end of a line, you have to press return. So in other words, and to continue the line, this first line after you define the function, def, of course, is the keyword to define the function and or method. You actually, when you press return, you actually have to expressly indent the next line. So indentation is huge in Python. So what I want you to do after this video, go to python.org, and it actually has on the very top sample programs or sample little programs that it wrote to do simple things. But you will see that the immediate thing is you will see the necessity of indentation to show to the Python, I guess you could say, engine, that this is the next line, or this is inside. This is like almost like a syntax cluster, if you will. So take a look at it, and yes, the drawback of Python is spacing, because sometimes you're not sure whether or not to press the tab or do you use the spacebar. And if you use the spacebar, how many spaces do I type? Well, I will tell you a rule of thumb is 4 little clicks on the spacebar. So you typed on the spacebar 4 times to get an effective indentation. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can press the tab. I'm pressing the tab now, and it's the same thing. The problem is you have to be consistent. So if you press tab to be quick on one line to go to the next line, and if you need to indent, you can't then use the spacebar because you will get a spacing error. And those in Python are very, very annoying. The other thing about the beauty of Python is you do not have to explicitly give the type of variable variable it is. So for example, make, of course, in this case would be a string. As you can see, when we grabbed the condition attribute right here, when we utilize the condition attribute, we actually can see that it's an actual string, and it happens to be refurbished, like a refurbished Model T. You're not going to get many classic cars in their original mint condition, because inside the engine they rust, they do everything, they just malfunction after years. So you're going to have to replace them with somewhat refurbished or even new parts. For example, if you had a classic 1968 Mustang, or maybe 1964, the very first year the Mustang came out, the latter part of 1964, you could imagine, even if it was kept in mint condition now in this year, years later, you would probably, the battery at least would have had to have been replaced once. So you're going to go to AutoZone or something like that and utilize a contemporary battery. So unfortunately, refurbished is an inevitability. So that being said, so the word refurbished would be common, and that's going to be in quotes right here because it's a string. But if you take a look at this condition right here, we didn't actually have to give it a type str, or usually the S for string is capitalized. In Java and maybe in other languages, you actually have to specify the type before you can even use it as a variable. So that's just one example of why why Python is so unique. And I understand, a lot of people don't like Python because it's not typed, because maybe you can get away with an integer versus a float versus a long type number or something like that. And I understand that. And we come from a world where if you're trained in one way, every language is adaptable to every other language. So, and actually, if you get hired as a software engineer, you can walk into a situation where COBOL and assembly are being used, and they don't even touch the contemporary languages like Python, Java, and Go, and everything like that. So, it all depends on what language you prefer. Python, I'm not calling Python the greatest language of all time, but this is a Python class, so I do have to hype Python a bit. Trust me, when I teach my Java class, I'm hyping up Java and putting down Python. So now we're in the Python class, and I'm hyping Python, and you saw me kind of talk down to other languages. But trust me, if it wasn't for languages like C and C++ and Perl, there would be no Python. So we have to show appreciation for those other languages. And I encourage you, if you really want to learn Python, to really understand Python, you also have to understand those other languages too, because Python builds on those languages. Actually, in the early 90s, when the Vito van Rossum, I think that's the name. I'm sorry, I should have looked it up. But Guido van Rossum, I believe that was his name. The guy who actually was the brainchild behind Python, he considered Python to be a readable replacement for another language that's being used right now in industry, and that's Perl. Perl is one of those languages that's very esoteric, but yet at the same time, it's very well documented, and there's so many good examples of coding out there that are being used. And Vito van Rossum said, you know what? I want Python to do everything that Perl can do, but I want it to be more readable than Perl. So, and I think he did his job. Python right now is influenced. Python is used by Google. So if you've ever downloaded and used Google Music, YouTube Music, I should say, but well, YouTube and Google are owned by Alphabet. So anyways, YouTube uses Python as its algorithm to get you to understand, to download your picks. So if you like Metallica, the algorithm says, well, if you like Metallica, you may like Guns N' Roses, you may like Megadeth, you may like, Iron Maiden. So, and I know that's not that big of a stretch. It's like, do you really need an algorithm to know that you like all kinds of heavy metal or hard rock? No, but it is the engine that is influencing a lot of tastes and a lot of behaviors exhibited by human beings. Python is behind many cybersecurity tools. So if you download Linux Kali, Linux Kali has a plethora of Ruby tools that use Ruby and also Python. So Python is literally everywhere in today's industry. It's powering our databases. It's powering everything. It is powering the middleware between what we input and what goes into non-SQL tables. It's powering big data. It's powering business intelligence. So it's everywhere. So I'm hoping everyone understood now what makes Python so special.